MPs debate a December general election in the UK in the hopes of breaking the Brexit deadlock. Let's take a look at the scene live in the House of Commons right now. A little earlier, the Prime Minister made his case for a snap poll.
And we are left with no choice but to go to the country to break free from this impasse and to allow us all to submit, as we must, in all humility, to the judgment of the electorate.
I'm Philippa Thomas, live at Westminster, where the opposition Labour leader says he does now support an early election. I'll bring you the latest on the manoeuvrings to get this bill through.
Also on Global Today, Boeing's chief executive is grilled by Congress over the company's attitude to safety. They accuse the plane maker of a disturbing casualness and flippancy while seeking approval for its 737 MAX to fly. And a White House official tells the impeachment inquiry he personally heard that controversial phone call between US President Trump and the President of Ukraine. This is Global. The UK could be heading for a general election in December after the opposition party Labour shifted its position to support the country going to the polls. Now, it's an attempt to break the stalemate over Brexit. MPs are currently debating a bill for an election on the 12th of December. The EU Council President Donald Tusk, well, he has said that this may be the last Brexit extension and urged the UK to make the best use of this time. Let's turn to my colleague who has been down at Westminster the whole day. Philippa Thomas, we've been following it. Night has fallen behind you in those hours that you have been keeping us abreast of developments in Westminster.
It has been chopping and changing quite a lot, Nuala, as we've gone through the day, and it's because it's a highly unusual day. The government is determined to push through all the stages of its parliamentary bill calling for an election on the 12th of December as fast as possible. This is the way that Boris Johnson pitched his appeal for that early election just a couple of hours ago.
And we are left with no choice but to go to the country to break free from this impasse and to allow us all to submit, as we must, in all humility, to the judgment of the electorate. And to allow us to make our case, and above all, to allow a new and revitalised Parliament with a new mandate to deliver on the will of the people and get Brexit done.
Now, there are many opposition Labour MPs who are actually rather unhappy at this prospect, not least because the Conservatives are currently leading in the polls. But Labour's leader, Jeremy Corbyn, who has for months been saying, of course I'm ready to face the voters, today said, yes, I too will back a pre-Christmas poll.
We will be seeking to expand the franchise in the December election. That means supporting votes at 16, as is the case now for Scottish Parliament and Welsh Assembly elections. And I think it also means that we support the rights of EU citizens with settled status to vote in elections in this country.
Well, Rob Watson is with us, our political correspondent, on the pulse of everything that's happening. It's a pretty feverish pulse today with all these manoeuvrings going on.
It is, but I think that fever is because politicians are just about to meet what they're in the business for, which is elections and selling themselves to the people. And I think, I mean, it seems to me the most likely outcome is that there is going to be a general election. And that, of course, is a landmark moment in this Brexit crisis, which has been unfolding now for 3.5 years. We already had one general election that didn't resolve the Brexit crisis, so the big question we're asking ourselves now is, will this one do that? And if so, in what way?
And what will it mean for at least the 48% of people out there in the UK who wanted to stay? Is this a last chance for Remainers?
That is certainly the way that the anti-Brexit parties are casting it. So the Scottish National Party and the Liberal Democrat Party are saying, come on, this is it, this is your last chance. And the reason why they're gambling on having an election now, and let's be in no mistake, this is a gamble for them, is that they think that there just isn't the majority, there aren't the votes in Parliament for having a second referendum. So faced between two, as they would see it, very difficult choices, they're going for the risk of an election.
Now, I started this hour by talking about the fact that the Labour leader is backing the idea of an early election, but can you explain to us somehow this business of the amendments that may be voted on in the next couple of hours?
Okay, so the only really important thing about it is it's if you think about a law in the UK, passing a law is like sticking up a Christmas tree, and then you can sort of hang bits on it. So that the Christmas tree here is having an election, we presume, on 9th, 10th, 11th or 12th, but certain politicians try to hang things on it. So someone would like for all EU nationals living here to vote. I mean, the big one is allowing 16 and 17-year-olds. Why does any of this matter? Well, the government has said if you hang too many things on this tree, that's it. We're taking the tree away. We're chop down the tree. No, you got it. You like this.
I did see, metaphor. But you're right, with the amendments or the baubles. Right. I mean, there's a 10-page list that Parliament has put out.
But my hunch is still, it's one of those moments in politics. You felt it, I've felt it, everyone watching will have felt it, where there's a certain kind of momentum, and whether it's a momentum towards something dumb or something sensible, momentum it feels like there is towards an election.
Totally agreeing with you there, Rob. Thank you, as ever, for guiding us through this. And just to let you know, Nuala, that the first vote, it's a long process, but the first vote is due in the next half hour or so, or 45 minutes or so. So we'll keep across what is happening for you, the entire BBC team here at Westminster.
Let's turn to the White House now. A national security official who was present when US President Donald Trump made his controversial call to the Ukrainian president has been giving evidence to the impeachment inquiries in Washington, D.C. Alexander Vindman, a decorated Army veteran, told Congress he reported his objections to pressuring Ukraine to investigate Democrat Joe Biden twice. In his opening statement, Mr. Vindman made clear his concern about the call, saying, "I did not think it was proper to demand that a foreign government investigate a US citizen." Well, let's head to Washington, D.C. now and speak to my colleague, Chris Buckler. So I'm giving a little of the details, Chris, there to our viewers. But how important is it that Mr. Vindman is speaking out?
Yeah, no, there's been a huge amount of publicity surrounding Alexander Vindman giving this evidence. He arrived at Congress this morning for a behind closed doors session, but as you say, we've already got an idea of what he's going to say, and it's partly important because he's the first serving White House official to actually give evidence. He is someone who sits on the National Security Committee. He's very much a Russia and Ukraine specialist, and he's also a US Army veteran who was awarded the Purple Heart. So he comes with a lot of credibility, if you like. And taking a look at this, which is his opening statement, you get a real sense of when he had two big concerns that were strong enough that he decided to contact the counsel, the lead lawyer for the National Security Council. The first was about the US ambassador to the EU, Gordon Sondland, who in a meeting with a very senior Ukrainian official discussed the idea that they wanted to push for an investigation into President Trump's rivals in order to get a White House meeting between the Ukrainian president and President Trump. So that was a kind of quid pro quo, as we keep on saying. Now, he was stopped from saying that. Ambassador Sondland was stopped by the then National Security Advisor John Bolton, but the conversation continued away from the room, and it was clear that he was trying to push for that. And then secondly, there was that call between President Trump and the Ukrainian president, in which the president pressed for this investigation into the potential presidential candidate, Joe Biden, and his son Hunter, who had business dealings in Ukraine. And as you say, as far as Lieutenant Colonel was concerned, he felt very, very strongly that he did not think it was proper to demand that a foreign government investigate a US citizen. And in fact, he went further. He said it felt it would potentially undermine US national security. So you get a real sense from Lieutenant Colonel Vindman that he is very concerned about what happened.
So what might happen next with these testimonies? We saw those very dramatic pictures last week of Republican lawmakers trying to stop a closed-door testimony taking place. Impeachment, it's a long old process if it does in fact continue. Yeah,
and Republicans feel that there isn't enough transparency with what is happening. Now, Democrats have come back with an answer. They want to hold a vote this week on Thursday to try and set out a plan, public proceedings for impeachment. Not an impeachment vote, not a vote to impeach President Trump, but rather setting out the process for these inquiries to go towards an impeachment vote. Now, already Republicans are giving indications that they're not happy with that happening. But at the same time, Democrats control the US House of Representatives. That is where the vote would take place, and they are determined to push forward. It's led President Trump to be extremely angry. In fact, he's been attacking the Speaker of the House on Twitter today, describing her as Nervous Nancy and saying that that Mrs. Pelosi wants to destroy the Republican Party. Now, ultimately, this all leads to a trial in the Senate. We are all away from that at the moment, but you get the sense that it is heading that direction.
Chris Buckler, thanks so much. Another story that is developing here today that we're following closely on Global. Now, let's turn to some of the day's other main news. Reports from the Iraqi city of Karbala says that a number of people have been killed and many more wounded during anti-government protests overnight. Medical sources and eyewitnesses say that security forces used live ammunition, with reports suggesting at least 18 people were killed. Russia says that armed Kurdish forces have withdrawn from the Syrian-Turkey border under the terms of a deal agreed between Moscow and Ankara. Now, the deadline has expired for the Kurds to pull out. Turkey says they will establish a planned safe zone in the area through joint patrols with Russia. Two British men, they've been seriously injured in a shark attack that was in Queensland, Australia. The men, thought to be in their 20s, were in water around the Whitsunday Islands, which is a popular tourist spot on the east coast. Rescuers say one of the men had his foot bitten off and the other had serious cuts to his calf. Now, this mountaineer from Nepal has climbed the world's 14 highest peaks in less than 7 months. Now, this is easily beating an earlier record of almost 8 years. Nirmal Purja, who's 36 and a former British Marine, reached the top of his last mountain, Shisha Pangma, in China on Tuesday morning. What an amazing feat. US lawmakers have accused Boeing of a pattern of deliberate concealment as it tried to get its fleet of MAX 737 jets in the sky. They were grilling CEO Dennis Muilenburg on Capitol Hill after two plane crashes that killed more than 340 people. Sitting in front of family members of some of the victims, the CEO admitted the company had made mistakes. Senators accused Boeing of lying to pilots and Congress about issues with the plane's software.
I'm asking you about Boeing policy as reflected in this email. Its chief test pilot deciding he was going to mislead pilots who were then going to take passengers into the air, these loved ones, and turn those planes into flying coffins.
Senator, I'm not sure what Mr. Faulkner meant by that email. I can tell you that certification and training materials are not determined by one individual.
Well, in fact, let me just interrupt you again. In the over 1,600-page original flight manual of Boeing 737 MAX, the aircraft's new MCAS computer system was mentioned only once in 1,600 pages in the glossary of abbreviated terms. So when Boeing came to us and they said it's the pilots, inexperienced pilots, you were lying to us as well.
So some of that hearing that was taking place. Vivian Nunes told us more from Capitol Hill.
Nuala, these lawmakers want answers. They want to know what caused, first of all, the Lion Air crash, but then what caused the second crash just 5 months later, killing in total 346 passengers and crew members. There was really, I have to say, an air of frustration in the hearing room this morning. Many senators grilling Chief Executive Dennis Muilenburg, the boss of Boeing, but really feeling as though they weren't getting sufficient answers from him. Senators put it to him that he put profits ahead of safety. There was a lot of focus on an email exchange between two testing pilots at Boeing. One pilot wrote to the other that he'd basically lied to regulators unknowingly. Now, Mr. Muilenburg said he didn't really know what that email exchange was about and he only saw it 2 weeks ago. sharing the frustration of the senators, I have to say, with the family members. Many victims' family members have flown into today's hearing. They were holding posters, large photographs of their loved ones who they lost in court. And one husband outside the hearing was saying he flew in from Poland. He'd lost his wife and his son in the Ethiopian Airlines crash, and he was here to prevent a third crash happening.
Thanks to Vivian for that update. Still to come on Global. California battles wildfires and power outages as the state braces for more bad weather that could fan the flames.
Indira Gandhi, ruler of the world's largest democracy, died today. Only yesterday she'd spoken of dying in the service of her country and said, "I would be proud of it. Every drop of my blood will contribute to the growth of this nation."
After 46 years of unhappiness, these two countries have concluded a chapter of history.
No more suspicion, no more fear, no more uncertainty of what each day might bring.
Booster ignition and liftoff of Discovery with a crew of 6 astronaut heroes and 1 American legend.
Boy, enjoying the show is right. This is beautiful.
A milestone in human history. Born today, this girl in India is the 7 billionth person on the planet.
Welcome back to Global. Lebanon's Prime Minister Saad Hariri has said he will resign after nearly 2 weeks of protests across the country. Now, demonstrators, they've continued to block roads for 13 days in protest of the country's economic situation, and they've been calling for the government to step down.
For 13 days, the Lebanese people have waited for a decision, for a political solution that stops the deterioration of the economy. And I have tried, during this period, to find a way out, to listen to the voice of the people. It's time for us to have a big shock, to face the crisis. I'm going to the presidential palace to present my resignation. To all our partners in political life, our responsibility today is how we protect Lebanon and revive its economy.
BBC's Zina Sinjab is in Beirut and said Mr Hariri's resignation has done nothing to quell the protests.
We can hear their voices celebrating and chanting, but also saying that they're going to stay in the protest in the streets, that there are other demands to go on, and they will not stop there. The question is, what's next government is going to be? Who's going to form it? Who's the Sunni leader who's going to form the government? And is it going to be a technocrat government? And who's going to block it from the other domination of power in the country? We've learned that so far until today, Hariri was not able to resign because Hezbollah was blocking this resignation. They didn't want a change in the government. But now he's reached a point where he had to deliver his resignation to the president, and it's in the president's hand to accept it or reject it.
And do we know the mood music on that, whether President Aoun will accept it?
Well, I think Prime Minister Hariri has made his announcement, and now it's the president to be blamed if he rejected the resignation. There was a key issue for the president, is that the foreign minister in Hariri's current government is a relative of President Aoun. He's the son-in-law. It's the foreign minister, Gebran Bassil, that most of the protesters were against him and want him out, and that's why the president didn't want the resignation of this government, but now he has no other choice. He has to accept this resignation. The protesters are in the street. They're going to continue blocking the roads, and there might be some escalations. Today there were some violent clashes, pro Nasrallah and pro the Speaker of the Parliament. The two Shia movements, basically Hezbollah and Amal, supporters of them were stormed into the protesters. They've attacked them, they burnt the tents, and they chanted chanted slogans for Hezbollah, and that's happened shortly before the announcement of the resignation, as if it's a message to Hariri that if you resign, there will be chaos to follow. But of course, the Prime Minister responded to people's demand, and now we'll have to see the responsibility on the President and how he's going to respond as well.
Thanks very much to Lena for that. Right, let's turn to California. Forecasters are warning of strong winds returning to the state as fire crews tackle large wildfires right across California. Thousands of people have been affected by a major blaze in Los Angeles, and many have had to leave their homes. These are satellite images giving you an idea of just how big these fires are. You can see that huge plume of smoke that's spreading from the Kincade and Grizzly wildfires, also going up to the north of San Francisco. Jonathan Vigliotti, he's from CBS, and he's in the town of Hurlsburg. Now, that is not far from the Kincade fire in Northern California. He has witnessed the impact of strong winds on these flames.
This wildfire really at the mercy of the wind. To give you some context here, on Sunday, wind gusts were upwards of 102 miles per hour. That is hurricane force, in fact, a Category 2. As that wind picks back up, it will likely whip up those hot spots into flames, and the big concern being those embers. They can be carried, as we have seen, several miles, landing on homes like the ones behind me, igniting them on fire and really destroying neighborhoods like this.
Let's hear more from Lisa McKaylee. She's an environmental scientist and president of the Pepperwood Foundation, and she talked more about these blazes.
It's really hard to explain what these conflagrations are like. So the speaker before was really clear about the most hazardous component being these Diablo winds that are ripping through the landscape. We're having extremely dry weather conditions, and this is the driest part of our year. It hasn't rained since last April in this area. We're a Mediterranean-type ecosystem. This is a natural phenomenon to some extent, but what we're seeing is, especially as climate change starts kicking in, each of these dry seasons are getting drier and more hazardous for us. So we manage a 3,200-acre field station with the California Academy of Sciences. Our field station burnt over entirely in 2017. And what has really been the shock right now is that our property burned again this year in 2019. What it's like to live here and our community, it's a very tight community. We have been experiencing power shutoffs, preventative power shutoffs, because it's really our electricity system, which is the source of the ignitions under these conditions. And so it sort of puts you on edge. For the last month, my home and my office, for example, have been shut down a couple days per week. So you have to be prepared for no power, no internet. Our internet systems are all strained. And then when the Kincade fire hit, it's very hard to get accurate information during the event. And so you really have to sit tight. You have to trust your first responders. You have to evacuate as soon as you hear the warning come in. And literally, I think hundreds of thousands of people were evacuated during this event because in light of recent mega fires, and this is really, I will say, in the last 5 years with the droughts that we've been having, we're really seeing unprecedented fire conditions where these fires move much more rapidly than our firefighters are used to. So it's sort of a whole new game that we have to get used to.
Well, what do you think, though, Lisa, watching this, and that is those statistically, the place of work, devastated twice. What would you like to see happen? And we have just under a minute. What do you think should be the first step?
Well, first of all, we have to take immediate action to reduce hazards to life and property. And as you saw, these are wind-driven events. So people have to harden their homes. They have to make sure their homes are as ignition resistant as possible. Often embers are getting sucked into people's HVAC systems. So they have to have screens and protective equipment on their homes, harden their homes. Clear the vegetation around your property. I'm an environmentalist, but in this case, it really is much healthier for the environment for us to avoid these homes from igniting. And we have a major forest management challenge ahead of us. Our forests are overstocked. The inadvertent effect of successfully fighting fires over the last 75 years is we now have about 10 times as many trees per acre in this area.
Lisa McKaylee there, thanks to her for joining us from California. We hope that she stays safe. Right, let's go back to our top story. That is that MPs in the UK are debating Boris Johnson's call for a general election on the 12th of December after the opposition Labour Party threw its weight behind a pre-Christmas poll. Let's take a look at some of the pictures now. The House of Commons, right, that looks pretty empty to you and me, but that is going to change. And I just want to give you some of the key timings for what is about to come up. They are going to have a vote on what's called the second reading of the bill. So that is the first Commons hurdle to be overcome. They just need a majority of 1. That's expected at 18 GMT, so in about 35 minutes from now. But what they do have to do is debate any amendments and vote on them. And I can bring you a few more details that has come into us on the amendments as well. We had talked a little bit earlier about Jeremy Corbyn, leader of the Labour opposition party, looking for proposing lowering the voting age and allowing EU citizens to vote. Well, they have not been selected for debate in the UK Parliament. And the other, though, a proposal to change the election date to December 9th, that has been provisionally selected for debate. So expect that coming up, and we're going to bring it to you all here on BBC World News. So I do hope you'll stay with us, and thanks very much for watching this edition of Global.